Welcome to the Weights and Plates podcast. I am Robert Santana. I am your host, along with Trent Jones, my co-host.
Yo, what's going on?
Not much, man. I'm tired. I'm drinking coffee. It's 5:49 in Arizona. It looks like it's almost 9 over where you're at.
Yeah, if you're drinking coffee now, what is the half-life of caffeine? Isn't it like eight hours or something like that?
Oh, shit.
Yeah,
Something like that.
It's going to be like 2. Yeah, you're not going to clear that out of your system till like 3 a.m.
Well, fortunately, I'm ADHD, so it has the opposite effect on me.
Oh, okay, there we go.
They say, they say in healthy individuals it's about 5 hours, but it can vary, It can vary.
Yeah, I believe that, man. I believe that. Well, luckily, I also, I heard you rattling around back there where I know you keep your whiskey, too. So,
yeah,
it's a little uppers and downers.
Right there.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. So
I am not a hypocritical dietitian by any measure. I get it right 95% of the time. I get a break here and there,
Yeah. So I have, I know we're going to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah.
But I have something that's completely unrelated to our topic that I wanted to ask you.
You're not going to sell like LifeLock or something right now, are you?
A LifeLock.
You sound like one of those podcasts, where they're like, but first.
But first, yeah. All right. So all right. So you know how I've talked about in the past, there's like, there's different exercises, like accessory exercises that come into vogue. They come in and out of vogue.
Yeah.
Like face pulls.
Yes.
I've noticed lately and maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's a trend. I've noticed like in the starting strength world on Instagram, all of a sudden I see everybody doing halting deadlifts. And I'm like, I haven't seen a halting deadlift in years.
Well, I never really saw one. There'd be it was a minority of us that even tried them, because for a while people were like, well, what's the difference? You might as well just finish it if you're going that high,
Right? Well, that's kind of my thing. I'm like, so that's what I wanted to ask you is, halting deadlifts. Do you use those? Do you ever program those for people? Like,
I program them off a deficit to make it even longer.
Okay.
Because I found that deficit deadlifts are extremely effective at working the floor. But if I want to follow Rip's line of thinking that, you want to eliminate the lockout position to exclusively challenge the lifter off the floor, then I combine those two concepts. Okay, the halting deadlift, but then add another 1.5 inches of distance at the bottom. And I've found that people that I've had do those, they start to get better kinesthetic awareness of the quads at the bottom, because it's usually the issue with new lifters. They open their hips, not their knees. That's where halting has become useful, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's what I was going to ask next. Is like, so who are these people that you're programming them for? So okay, so you're using them to fix the bottom, the leg drive off of the floor, basically.
Yeah, precisely. So I'm sure there's people that are going to disagree with me on this, and I really don't care. But after doing this for as long as I have, granted, I'm not a 1,000-pound deadlifter, but, all that is relative. I've, pushed my deadlift up for 10 years. I am of the position that if you're fucking up off the floor, it's technical or you're overtrained, because it should be easy off the floor. You should always be able to break more off the floor than you can lock out. And the reason why is because there's more muscle mass involved. Your knees are bent, your hips are bent. So you're using your knee extensors and your hip extensors to get that bar moving. By the time it gets to your knees, all you're left with is your hips. You don't have that extra quad to help you out at the lockout position. And if you do, you're hitching it, right? So then you get a red light, doesn't count. So every time, when I'm doing, the beauty of doing reps, so people who follow me know that I've been doing 10s lately. The beauty of doing reps is you're liable to move that bar 1/2 inch forward at some point if you're doing 10s, And one rep might be harder than the one that's after it. So that's one of the things I learned with reps. So in my head, if I ever have a hard rep off the floor, I immediately assume it's not over midfoot, and I straighten my legs out more. And then the next one comes right up. And it might get harder at lockout, but it'll come right up. And then the one after that will come right up. So basically, the bar should come right off the floor about 8 out of 10 times. The other 2 times is A, you're overtrained and you're probably squatting too much or deadlifting too much or not eating enough, or a variety of things. It's a recovery issue.
Right.
That's usually when there's a recovery issue, the deadlift is the one lift that will always let you know by simply not moving, the bar not moving. In terms of technical reasons, it's usually that the bar is forward. That's why it's hard to move off the floor. The other reason is because you're not engaging your quads. And sometimes that's just a body awareness issue. It's, foreign to a lot of people that, the bar's on the floor and I'm, have my arms around it and I'm bent over. So I just got to, unbend myself or become more vertical to pick it up.
Right.
That's true. Your hips are going to open a little bit, but at the very bottom, your knees open more than your hips because you're basically in a quarter squat position, but your hips are pretty much fully flexed for a lot of us. If you have long arms, you're going to be less flexed at the hips than somebody with short arms, like, a mutual friend of ours who's may or may not be listening. So, if you have to reach further down, you're going to be in more hip flexion than if you don't. But your knees are practically extended in the bottom position of a deadlift. You're in like an eighth to a quarter of a squat, right? So you should see those straighten out early. Your quads are doing most of the work to break the bar off the floor. Now, when you put a couple mats under your feet, you're now extending that part of the range of motion. Just like if you grip it real wide, you're extending the top part of the range of motion. It finishes further up your hips near your hip pointers versus further down, for most people, right? So snatch grip deadlift adds range of motion at the top. Deficit deadlift adds range of motion at the bottom. Deficit halting places all the emphasis at the bottom. So I typically use that for the early intermediate who, prematurely ended his deadlift linear progression because of these technical issues, And I find that combining those two concepts and prescribing the halting off of a 1.5 inch deficit, which is 2 horse stall mats, tends to teach the lifter how to engage the quads in addition to the hips. One of the things that confused me as a lifter, so, I'd been squatting since I was 18 years old, and I would periodically deadlift. I didn't understand the purpose of the lift. My low back would get sore because I was probably doing it wrong when I was younger. So I thought it was a low back exercise because I'm bending over, and bending over means your back is somehow working, even though your hips are what's moving, But, as a young kid, I'm like, well, I'm bending over and I feel it in my back's doing the work, Now, it is a back exercise, but your back's not doing any dynamic work. It's doing isometric work. So, or in the physiology field or biomechanics field, you might say isotonic work. Your back is not doing any isotonic work. It is doing isometric work. So it's maintaining the position of your spine. That's what your back muscles are doing. What's moving are your hips and knees, just like on a squat. However, on the squat, your knees move a lot more than on a deadlift. Hips may move the same depending on how you're built. You have an itty-bitty torso and long femurs. You'll probably have similar range of motion if your arms are short too,
Yeah, my wife, when she sets up with the standard prescription setup with like shins 1 inch for the bar, her hips are above her shoulders.
Oh, shit. So what do you do?
Yeah.
That's in flats or lifting shoes?
It's in flats even a little bit.
Holy shit.
So yeah, what I do is I have her pull in flats, and then I also have her move the bar out intentionally away from the shins, more like 1.5 2 inches, and I have her frog stance because she can pull that off.
Okay.
So all the above gets her back to be like 1 degree of of angle above her hips.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but what she knows is she's learned basically off the floor that she is going to be slightly forward of midfoot off the floor. So she knows how to basically engage her lats. And as soon as she gets that leg drive off the floor, to correct a little bit and pull that bar back into the shins. And she's able to get back over the midfoot pretty quickly.
Well, it's better. It's better than putting your fucking hands between her legs. Fuck that.
Right.
we don't acknowledge that as as an acceptable method of lifting here.
No. So yeah, okay, well, cool. But no, I'm glad to. That's interesting because I have not used haltings. I generally, so if I have someone who's doing what you're describing, where they are, well, if they're forward, if the bar is forward to their midfoot, we just got to fix that positioning issue.
Fixable.
And so that's usually that's we use just some cues and usually we'll give them some visual cues to fix that. Like
the issue I'm describing, and I know you've seen this. We've all seen this. When it's time to pull the bar up, their hips start to open, their shins go forward, and the bar goes forward.
Exactly right. There was a guy at the last seminar that I audited who was doing this. It was actually kind of impressive. He pulled like 405 for 5 like this.
Oh yeah.
And the bar would kick out like a couple inches every single rep. But that was the thing. He was basically just hinging at the hips only to get the bar moving. Mm-hmm. And but see, the way that I deal with that problem when that comes into play now is I will do like pause deadlifts because I want them to feel that bar on their shin as they drive off the floor. And so that's been my solution, is basically to have them do a pause deadlift where they're stopping a little bit before the knee, because if they have attempted to hinge the bar off the floor with just their back, then they're going to feel their shoulders behind the, basically behind the bar, and they're going to be out of position. So we'll kind of work on like just a couple of positional cues, right? Shoulders in front of the bar and pausing the deadlift. And so that gives them time to think about where they are, and then they can correct. And then they know they know what the feeling should be midway through the rep on the subsequent rep, right? But I can see the advantage of haltings, right? If you're just trying to get somebody to just get a strong leg drive off the floor, because the pause deadlift doesn't require necessarily as strong of a push off the floor, So yeah, that's useful. I might have to give those a try.
I like them with a deficit. I think it works better that way.
Sure.
Because man, when I was big on deficits years ago, and I still prescribe them. I mean, I haven't done it on my basically. I'm at that. I don't know if you remember in the Gray Book, which for those of you who aren't familiar, Practical Programming for Strength Training, 3rd edition. He talks about how once you become an advanced lifter, assistance exercises become less useful, and you're basically just doing the main lifts. Remember that?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I've ended up. I don't really do assistance work. I do for my bench because upper body's a different animal, but for squat and deadlift, I just squat and deadlift. I do one set of RDLs. That's the only different exercise I do.
Yeah, I was about to say, well, you do RDLs. I think that's the thing, right? Like, and this is not coming from me. This is actually, I think Andy Baker has said this, many times over the years, that, when you're an intermediate, your pool of exercises widens and it opens up quite a bit.
Yep.
And it becomes large because, in part, what's happening is that you're trying to find the things that work for you, that move the needle, whether it's, lifts that help you with a technical issue, like supplemental lifts that help you with a technical issue, or ones that just help you overload a part of the movement that you struggle with. But then, as you get more advanced, you kind of filter through all that stuff and you figure out, you're like, RDLs help. Deficits, rack pulls, you might have one or two that you do, and everything else is just kind of superfluous at that point because you've already gone through that filtering process.
Yeah, and deadlifts are a little different because, as Andy talked about earlier this year, you brought it up, you can train deadlift strength without training the deadlift, and that becomes more apparent as you become an advanced lifter. So that's like the one lift where, it broadens, then it narrows, then it broadens some more, kind of, I think.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other part of this that we haven't really addressed, is that, haltings, just like pause deadlifts, or frankly, just light deadlifts or rack pulls or any other variant, can be used to manage fatigue from pulling. So if you're pulling heavy off the floor, once every 2 weeks, let's say, you need to do some deadlift work in between that, you can't necessarily pull heavy again, right? So you need to figure out some sort of lighter variant to manage your fatigue. And so that can be...
People don't understand how absolutely fatiguing it is to overcome the inertia of a stationary bar on the floor. That's a whole different animal than performing a movement that starts eccentrically and is followed by a stretch reflex,
Yeah, that's right. That's why it's called the dead lift.
Yeah, exactly. So you eventually, I'm doing it now, but I'm doing 10s. If I start getting up to 5s and the intensity gets high enough, no way I can do these weekly, It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I think I was at every 3 to 4 weeks off the floor. And, Rip has talked about people not even deadlifting at all for their whole training cycle, which I thought was absurd. But I had this girl I trained, and we didn't use it at all. She'd done novice with me, and she did intermediate, and then she had exercise ADHD. If she's listening, she knows who she is. She's a good friend of mine now. She needs to get her ass back. I miss her. But she got bored, and she has a gym in her basement. She trains clients, and she's like, let's do hypertrophy. So I programmed a bunch of hypertrophy stuff. And about week 8, she's like, am I going to be able to deadlift? Like she wasn't really a strength enthusiast. She was a convert, like I taught her how to use a barbell, peppered in some isolation stuff, and she bought in, and she was a responder. She built muscle fairly easily in her upper body. Lower body got bigger just from squatting more, which shocked her. And then she had to kind of get used to clothing changes,
Yeah.
But it was all positive in the end, It was real helpful for her. It's a good story. I should reach out to her. But anyhow, she's like, I'm dreading asking you this, but am I going to be able to deadlift? Because she knew it was going to get hard again, And then I'm like, yeah, we're about finished with these 8s. So since we're going to 5s, let's just, or maybe we're doing 5s and we're going to 3s. It was pretty late in the game where intensity was just starting to get high. Threw the deadlift in, she PR'd it by like 20 pounds, I think.
Right.
So I'm like, rip, that son of a bitch was right,
Well, I mean, so I think the deadlift is like it's technically pretty simple to execute especially compared to the squat and the press. The bench is kind of that same way to me too. It's a pretty simple lift once you get the hang of it, and that's the thing. Like once you've been doing this for a while, like like your technique doesn't really move that much. Like form creep can still happen to anybody, but your error bars are real small.
Yeah, mine have narrowed quite a bit.
Yeah, and so it's like you could easily go 6-8 weeks without pulling, and like you're going to pull just fine, right? There's going to be no degradation in technique, probably.
No, and back to what you said about haltings. I do the same thing with RDLs, not for myself because I'm lazy and I'm just trying to accumulate work, but I'll have guys do deficit RDL so they'll get the full range of motion of the deadlift with the RDL. So now they're basically making the deadlift continuous without bouncing the bar off the floor,
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'll have them stand on like 2 to 4 mats. Usually 2 mats does it. That should get, you should be able to get to the bottom of a deadlift with full-size plates on with 2 mats. Yeah, those are brutal. Deficit RDLs, which actually become full range of motion deadlifts without stopping,
Yeah, sure. Now, are you having them bend their knees at the bottom?
Just as much as they need to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. I can see that being really useful. I tend to have people RDL. A few people can go all the way to the floor, and eventually they're going to get there. But usually I'll have them go to like mid shin or at least a little bit below the knee at first.
Yeah.
But I'll have them do a pretty stiff-legged RDL, like just a little tiny bit of knee bend at the very extreme end of the range of motion.
Yeah.
But generally I'm using them as a hamstrings builder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a real long eccentric stretch. But yeah, so anyway, that's not at all what we wanted to talk about today.
No,
but
not at
I
all.
thought it was an interesting question, and I wanted to ask you. So
Should we just do a whole episode
thank you for that.
on deadlift one day?
Oh yeah, we should do an episode on like deadlift variations and deadlift training. I think it'd be interesting.
Okay.
I find a lot of people don't understand that when you are coming out or just getting to the end of the starting strength linear progression, the novice vanilla linear progression, like you see in the book, a lot of people don't understand that you accumulate a lot of fatigue, and that means that you can't go heavy all the time, and you have to start changing your programming. And the deadlift is that's a big one. People are like, why it won't even break off the floor? It's glued. It's like, well, you're probably fried, man.
Exactly.
From all the squats and and presses that you just did. So anyway, so pivoting back to what we were going to talk about today, we wanted to talk about fluids, which, honestly, now that I'm thinking about this, we probably should have done this like 2 months ago, because I know in my home state of Texas, it's been like 105 degrees like every day for the last 2 months until very recently. But yeah, we wanted to talk about fluids, fluid intake, electrolyte levels,
And booze. We figured that these topics individually would be covered pretty quick, so we combine them. And since alcohol tends to relate to hydration for obvious reasons, we can mix that into.
So why do we even need to be hydrated in the first place? What's a big deal about drinking a bunch of water? Because everybody says that, right? You got to be like, what did Tom Brady say? He's like, I'm the most hydrated athlete in the world. He drinks a gallon of water and almond milk every day.
If you're in any type of sport with continuous movement or aerobic sport, and all sports are, they're pretty much aerobic, even the quote unquote anaerobic ones. I mean, football, they're doing a lot of hit, but they're moving pretty continuously. It's not 10 reps and you stop. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're going to lose a lot of fluid. You're going to sweat a lot. You're going to have sweat losses. You got to replace that, right? And why? Because 70% of your muscles are water, and you need water for other bodily functions. Your kidneys are constantly excreting substances. So without water, you will die. You can go without food for several days, but you can't go without water for, what is it, Trent, 2 days, I think? 1 day?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it depends, like where you are out in the desert, you're probably pretty fucked after 24 hours of no water, especially in the heat. But I'd say
Yeah,
like generally
say
2 to 3 days.
Yeah, they say generally a person can survive without water for 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, sounds about right.
You know, your brain is about 83% water. So what I say, your muscles are 70%, 75%. Your brain's about 83% water. Your kidneys are about 83%. Your heart is about 3/4 as well. So most of the human body is full of water. You know, I think if I remember correctly, men it's about 65%, women it's about 60, slightly less. Your blood is about 95% water. You know, so yeah, you need this for a lot of shit to function. You know, essentially, you need it for vital function, literally, right? And that's just in general, right? Take a sedentary person, you still need a lot of water. Again, you'll die if you go without it for 3 days. Now you add in activity. Now you're moving. If you're moving continuously, if it's hot out, you know, you're going to lose some of that water. You have to replace some of that water. Then you also need to replace the electrolytes with it. So electrolytes are kind of how they sound. They conduct electricity by moving ions through the water. In the context of what we're talking about, without going deep into the chemistry, we're talking about sodium, we're talking about chloride, we're talking about potassium. Chloride typically comes with sodium, and that's what salt is. Salt is sodium chloride. Sodium helps pull water in. Carbohydrate also helps pull water in. That's why, you hear people say, I feel so bloated because I ate all these carbs. Carbohydrates stores glycogen and bring water in at a 3-to-1 ratio, right? So for every gram of carbohydrate you're storing as glycogen, you're bringing in 3 grams or mLs of water. So it could be very helpful in hydration. That's why Gatorade has sugar, sodium, and potassium in it. And all that helps maintain your fluid balance. If you're taking creatine supplements, you need even more, because what creatine does is essentially hydrates the muscle more. So it deposits more water into your muscles. Remember, your muscles are 70% water. And that can help you crank out another couple reps on a set, right? So you need more water for that. One of the symptoms of, I won't even say full dehydration, but let's say you're not drinking enough water, you might start to feel dizzy during your lifts. Your blood pressure might drop a little low, because you also need water to help regulate your blood pressure, water and electrolytes. That's why, they say a high sodium diet might be associated with high blood pressure, and they say it might not, and they say it might. I mean, they go jump around on this, but clearly there's an acute response that we've observed. If you, load up on salt, you could make your blood pressure go up pretty fast if, you want to measure that.
Right.
Is it going to lead to chronically high blood pressure? No, you adapt to it typically. It could. Some people are what's called salt sensitive, which is very difficult to measure. But the result is that, their blood pressure goes up real easy because of salt intake, and it comes down to lower levels because of salt intake going the other way. But when I was dieting years ago and I would press heavy, like high intensity, I'd get dizzy as I'm pushing up, and then I'd have to lower the bar because basically I'd start to black out, and then I couldn't even contract my muscles anymore. So that sucked. And I didn't know that that's what it was until my schedule changed. I had to start training at night, and suddenly I can press heavy, but my belt went up a notch because I had more food in me, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
I got more carbs in me, I have more liquid in me, I have more electrolytes in me, so I wasn't getting dizzy anymore, and I haven't trained in the morning since, so I don't know if that would happen now. It's definitely more pronounced when I'm leaner, but it hasn't happened in 6 years, and I'm as lean as I was then. I weigh a little bit more now, gained some muscle, awesome, but yeah, I would get real dizzy because the blood pressure would drop. Your blood sugar can drop too. So, people like to criticize intra-workout carbohydrates and say, oh, that's a waste because it's just going to...
you're not going to use that when you train,
You're not going to, you don't use that when you train, right? Yeah, that's right. That's what they say, that you're using glycogen. You're not going to use those, you're not going to use sugar you just consumed. And, that's generally true. Unless you're running a marathon and you've depleted all of your muscle glycogen, you start sipping on Gatorade or dextrose and water, you're not going to use blood glucose for energy. The only time that's used is if you've depleted all of your glycogen stores and you start taking it in, like at the end of a race. That's been reported in the literature, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're running for 26 miles and you're on mile 24, 25, and you have nothing left in your muscles, nothing left in your liver, you can pull it out of your bloodstream for a period of time. That's why those beverages and those tabs and all that shit became popular for endurance athletes. But lifting is not a glycogen depleting activity. You do break some down though as you lift. So why the hell would you need to take carbohydrates during a workout? Well, this comes back to the hydration thing, right? And this becomes more important in the morning for many people versus afternoon trainees. So
yeah,
I find it really hard. There are probably plenty of people out there that would argue otherwise and acknowledge there's, different situations. But generally, I'd say it's hard to have a hydration problem if you train in the afternoon or the evening. Now, if you are fasting and you stop eating at 11 p.m. and don't eat again until 5 p.m., maybe a problem like that. If you work out in the sun all day and you're not drinking enough water, you can run into a problem like that. I certainly had guys come in the gym for that, but let's assume that you're on a conventional diet where you're eating meals peppered throughout the day and drinking, and then you just go train. You're probably not going to have an issue. It's the morning lifter that has probably been on an 8 to 12 hour fast overnight, probably didn't eat a huge meal before bed, goes in the gym at 6, 7 in the morning, and starts experiencing, symptoms of low blood pressure, low blood sugar. Remember, you're not going to use those carbohydrates from a dextrose mix or Gatorade to perform the squat, to fuel the squat. The squat is going to use muscle glycogen stored in your legs and other muscles. Because the glycogen stored in your muscles is primarily stored for that reason. Muscles are very selfish. So for those of you who don't know, you cannot release muscle glycogen into the bloodstream. That comes from your liver. So you also store glycogen in your liver. However, most of your muscle glycogen is stored in your muscles. I think it's like what? So it's 500 grams, so 4/5 is what, 80%? Is that right? Yeah.
Right.
So 80% of your glycogen in the 80% of the glycogen in the human body is stored in the skeletal muscle. But you can't release it out of there. Once it's in there, it stays in there, and your muscles use it to feed themselves. They say, fuck everybody else. The other 20% is in your liver, and you get a little bit in the kidney, a little bit in the fat stores, but mostly in your muscles and, about 1/5 in your liver. Your liver releases it into your bloodstream. That's where your blood glucose comes from. So liver takes in sugar, releases sugar. It regulates your blood glucose. It keeps your glucose levels balanced. It's the regulator of your blood glucose. So what happens is when you sleep overnight for 8 to 12 hours without any food, your liver is constantly releasing glucose into your bloodstream, but then it's not receiving any from food, right? So by the time you wake up, you're probably depleted of liver glycogen.
Right. And I was going to say, too, I think the brain is a big user of glucose,
Oh, yeah,
right?
the brain eats all up.
You mentioned that earlier. So overnight, your brain is still active, even if your muscles aren't doing much.
Yeah, it's the primary fuel. I had to yell at one of my members today. He's a physician, so he's a smart guy and understands the hard sciences. So, I have to be on my toes when we're talking. But, he's a keto guy, and he is reporting. It's so funny. He gave me shit, right? So I was training my dog. I hope he's listening, because once in a while, it's hard to zing a doctor. They know everything. But once in a while, I get a good one in. And I was training my dog, and I was calculating the portions, because I'm feeding raw food, not kibble. So I'm having to basically do a lot of manual calculating to figure out how much she needs. And it's like, 5 to 8% of body weight for puppies. And then he's like, that puppy's too skinny. She wants more food. Then I'm like, well, dude, I'm following the calculation. Then he gives me shit. He's like, well, first he says, if you gravity feed them, they will eat until they're full. They will learn to get full, and then they won't overeat as adults. And I'm like, dude, this dog will eat like 3 or 4 pounds if I do that. And he's like, she'll figure it out, man. Well, sure enough, she ate 3 pounds for a few days, and she did eventually calm down. There was diarrhea, there was puke the first day, but then once she caught up on her weight, she was fine.
Yeah.
Anyways, so this guy says, are you feeding the dog or feeding the paper? And I'm like, God, man, I'm being a fucking hypocrite. I make fun of people for, using academic solutions that aren't working in practical problems, right? And then and here I am doing that. So I'm like, all right. So I've gravity fed the dog. She threw up and had diarrhea the first day because she ate so damn much. And then by day 2 or 3, her portions got smaller and smaller. And then now she's at a healthy weight. And now I know how much to give her, which is cool. But fast forward, he's sitting there talking to me about, he's getting dizzy, and this, that, and the other. And I know why. I'm like, this guy's not eating enough carbs. He's 66 years old, He's eating a bunch of fat and probably a fairly decent amount of protein because he does supplement. Yeah. And I understand the argument, he's sedentary all day. He's very sedentary, and it's gotten worse because he needs a hip replacement, which he's getting. And when he comes in the gym, because he needs a hip replacement, his squats and deadlifts aren't that heavy, So the only heavy stuff he's doing is bench and press, and that's not a lot of activity, right? So I understand that he doesn't need 300-400 carbs or even 250 probably, right? But first, I'm like, my position on this is clear. I'm like, this was earlier today, actually, that I said this. So it's kind of cool that we decided on this topic. I basically said, you're not getting enough carbs. The brain alone eats up 130, which I know he knows because he's read all the textbooks, And, if you're feeling symptoms, it's clearly not enough. Because one of the arguments he tried to make earlier was that, his levels are not low. And I'm like, what are you, addressing the paper or, addressing yourself, your body? so
got him.
Yeah. Once in a while I get him. He'll probably argue with me about this tomorrow, but or not. It's all in fun. He's a good guy. Good friend, too. He picks up whiskey for me when it's on sale near his house. So there's a lot of variability here. These numbers don't mean anything. They can mean one thing for one person, another thing for another person, right? But what I'm kind of getting at is in the context of lifting, if you're waking up early in the morning and you're not sufficiently hydrated and your blood sugar levels are not at a good place, then that's going to impact your training. It's not because your muscles can't contract or your muscles don't have glycogen to feed themselves. It's because there's not enough sugar circulating through your blood and your whole body hydration status is not in equilibrium, right?
Right.
So you have non-muscular variables that are influencing your ability to fucking train. It's not all about your muscles contracting and relaxing or getting fueled, right? This fuel is used for others. There are other vital functions beyond muscle contractions, people, and they require these things, right?
Right. And let's not forget, too, that people training in the morning are probably also drinking caffeine.
Yeah.
Which is a diuretic, which will cause you to excrete, free water, right?
That's been debated as well because you're taking in water, but we're not going to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just think about it like it makes you piss more.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't drink that much coffee, probably.
No.
Unless you're drinking like mud water or something. Like,
So yeah.
You better not be drinking Folgers over there. That's what I'm saying.
Oh God.
But
but
if you drink like a couple ounces of cold brew, right? Yeah, I mean that's does have some fluid in it, but it's not going to displace what you pee out.
No. So when you consume sugar or carbohydrates during a workout, you're not doing so to fuel your muscles necessarily. You're doing so to keep your blood sugar levels up and to hydrate yourself because glucose and sodium share a transporter that help bring water into the intravascular space quickly. That's why electrolyte beverages like Gatorade will typically have carbohydrate in the form of a simple sugar along with sodium and potassium. Because of the way that it transports in the human body, you can pull more water in quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's another aspect of this too that I think is overlooked a lot of times, and I run into this with my older folks, is that when we think about hydration, right, it's like you said, it's not just the musculoskeletal system. There's also sort of these other soft tissues that are hydrated, right? So like the discs in your spine, those have fluid in them. And when you get dehydrated, they tend to lose height. And when they lose height, they're not able to do their job of cushioning the vertebra as well as they normally do. And then you can get all sorts of weird back tweaks that start to pop up too.
Oh, yeah. Same with elbows, shoulders. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, if your spine's bugging you and you start to get a little sciatica pop up, an easy first thing to do is get on top of your hydration. Because as those discs, if they are dehydrated, then they're not going to cushion as well. And you could possibly have some bony stuff that's pushing on the nerve root and lighting up various things in your back and down your leg.
Very good point.
Very common thing that I run into.
Yeah. So, we can't hammer this enough, but the main point here is don't think of fluid, electrolytes, and especially the sugar. Don't think of this as something that you're putting into your muscles like, a super steroid that's going to make you lift more, because it's not going to do that. It's not going to do that. If you're well hydrated and you take in carbs, when you work out, it won't make a bit of a difference. But if you're waking up in the morning and you're going to lift within an hour of waking up, then an electrolyte beverage can help. It could also help to eat more before bed too. I've never found the right dose for myself with this, so I still got to experiment. But when I was doing 60 grams of carbs in the morning, I think what was missing for me was the electrolytes. Looking back on it, I was doing sugar and water and whey protein, but I probably needed more salt. I needed to put a salt tab in there and maybe some potassium, or maybe. So I was talking to Dr. Bradford earlier, and she likes to put salt tabs in water because she gets low blood pressure.
Yeah.
And one of the things she mentioned was that, I knew this, but it's like one of those things that like, oh yeah, that's right. The low sodium salt tends to have more potassium in it, or the salt substitutes do too. We didn't talk about those, but she said the lower sodium salt tabs will tend to have more potassium. That's how and it makes sense because that's how the salt substitutes work. When like you get people that have kidney disease or high blood pressure, the Mrs. Dash stuff tends to be high in potassium. So I would imagine if you're still wanting the sodium, but not as much as table salt, they're going to probably up the potassium to make up the difference and still get that flavor. Yeah, so you could put a salt. I should have been putting salt tablets in there. I think that's what was missing, and that's why I was telling her. I'm like, I laugh when people spend money on Pedialyte and Noon and all these expensive electrolyte powders, right? When you can just buy, a big tub of dextrose and some salt tabs, or even just put straight sodium chloride in there,
Right. Yep.
And it's going to save you a lot of money. It's pretty cheap to make yourself a hydration beverage. But either way, I think this is especially important for the morning trainee or somebody who doesn't eat very often throughout the day for whatever reason. Obviously, I would prefer you to have at least 3 meals a day, But if you're in a situation, let's say you're a surgeon, or an OR nurse, and you're just blocked out for many, many hours, right? And you're just not eating very often throughout the day. Electrolytes and sugar could be helpful. After you get off work, if you're going to go lift in the afternoon, that could be helpful. And yes, your belt will go up a notch, and that's fine. It's temporary. You're intentionally, quote unquote, bloating yourself. You're not really bloating yourself. You're just fuller, but you're just trying to shove a bunch of water into your body so that you can train. And again, it's not helping you lift heavier via stronger muscle contractions or more muscle or more gains or whatever you want to call it. It's making your other vital functions continue as normal, right? Because if you, let's say you go in and you're hungover, right? You're gonna, it's gonna fuck with your brain, and then your coordination goes off, right? Like I've seen this many times where I get these college kids that, they get drunk on the weekend, and then Monday morning rolls around and their form is all over the fucking place. They're like, oh, a drink Saturday. I'm like, well, yeah, that fucks with your central nervous system. So the technique aspect goes to hell. Like my cousin is the person I think of when I think of this. When like 7-8 years ago, I trained him when he was in college, and it's pretty cool because now he's pushing 30, and his baseline numbers, turn heads at the commercial gym because he'll just, he's not really committed to it and hasn't been for a while, but. He'll go in and pull over 4, squat over 3, bench over 2, and, he's 6 foot and he's about $185, so he looks more like a basketball player or a swimmer,
Right,
But
yeah.
because he, killed himself when he was 18, 19, 20, 21, just, drinking a gallon of milk a day, eating pounds of beef and loaves of bread and, pushing his weight up to 217 and getting strong, He kept a lot of it because strength is the slowest to go away. But that's an aside. We could talk about that later. My point is, he would get wasted on the weekends and kept all his calories up, so the rest of his recovery was fine, but alcohol's a stressor. Alcohol fucks with your central nervous system, so your central nervous system coordinates movement. So what do you think's going to happen? You take a complex movement like the squat. In his case, he's got weird-ass anthropometry. He's got to bend way over because he's all femurs, Right. And he's all over the place, and I'm like, you drank this weekend, didn't you? I could call it every single time. I knew when he drank. And then I saw it's in other people, too. And when the form just kind of like is unusually bad, first thing I asked, did you drink over the weekend?
Right,
so,
right.
Again, like, you're lifting weights, but weightlifting does not just depend on your muscles and joints functioning, right? And your muscles and joints don't just function because of how big they are or how dense they are. There's other vital functions that are also working indirectly to ensure that you can do that, right? Your central nervous system regulates how your muscles fire, right?
You think about, like, if you ever seen somebody that's like severely dehydrated, like, I don't know why this comes to mind, but you ever see that show Deadliest Catch?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's like these dudes on these, huge commercial fishing vessels, like crab, fishing vessels out in the Arctic Sea. So, at like a calm day is like 10-foot waves.
Yeah.
And so the boat's just like going like up and down like crazy. Well, there was an episode I remember from years ago where I think it was a camera guy on the Discovery crew. He was new, had never worked this show before. So he would just get this horrible seasickness. And it very quickly escalated from like he started throwing up to like basically dry heaving. And he, they give him some like Dramamine or whatever the normal stuff you'd take for that. He tries to like take like sips of water, and he goes right back to dry heaving. And like they're like, well, we've got this suppository, and he's like, give it to me. And but the thing was, like, this guy got so badly dehydrated so quickly because of his nausea that he started having like he started seizing on the ground. He was having these intense seizures, and you see like the guy, like they had to airlift him off the boat because his like he lost control of his arms and his hands, and but yeah, so basically what's happening there, right, is that he didn't have enough fluid content for all the normal central nervous system functioning. All of those normal impulses start going haywire, right?
Well, and without going into basic anatomy and physiology, you need your sodium and potassium and chloride for all that electrical conductivity to happen, which allows the muscles to contract.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see, like, in an extreme example, this is what happens. So on a more, sort of tame level, if you just disrupt those impulses, then, because of alcohol intake or whatever, dehydration, then your coordination is going to suffer first, right? You may not be seizing on the floor. I hope not.
Yeah.
But your coordination is certainly going to suffer. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you need sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium for muscle contractions to occur, right? So it's not just water. If you drink too much water, not enough electrolytes, you can dilute your electrolytes, and that will impact muscle function, right? And I think that's what you're talking about in an extreme case. You made me think of, do you ever see that documentary Into the Canyon?
No, is this about like the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, these guys hiked it long ways. They went across the whole thing, right? And it took them several months. Watch it; it's really cool. It's really cool because I always wondered. I'm like, can you hike that damn thing? And they did it. And the first time they had to get airlifted out because they got hyponatremic. Their sodium levels were low.
Yeah.
So when they went back in, they were more. The guy had the balls to go back in. So they went back in, and they were more prepared, and they finished it. They did the whole thing, and it took them. I forgot how many days, man. I think it was like 3 to 6 months, something like that, to do the whole thing.
Wow, that's intense.
It's really cool. They went all the way across the damn canyon. And they said it was cool because you see things that you aren't going to see in the pictures. Obviously.
I was about to say, there's probably not very many people down there in some of the spots you get to.
Some of it,
it's an intense hike just going down and back up. There's all these warnings when you go to the Grand Canyon that they're like, you must be prepared. Like there's people that they have to rescue all the time to get down, and they brought like an energy bar and like a one little water bottle, and they're like, you're gonna die.
No, you need a pack. It's long. I should see if Christy wants to do it. Go rim to rim. That you could do, but these guys went into the canyon from one end to the other, which is crazy.
That's intense.
And you can't do that. You have to be well prepared to camp, and so you have to be a survivalist at that point. That's why those guys got pulled out the first run, and then they had to go back a second time better prepared. I don't remember why that happened. I know what happened to him. He was hyponatremic. I just can't remember the details. I was watching it just because I was interested in the whole adventure,
Yeah.
And then that happened in the beginning. I'm like, whoa, I thought they'd finished it. Then I'm like, oh, the guy went back. Awesome, So, watch it, Into the Canyon. But then they were talking about how they're fighting them putting hotels and resorts there for fucking decades. They've been fighting that off. But it's pretty cool. Anyways.
So hyponatremia is something that you can get as well, right? Like you said, taking in too much water, not enough electrolytes. I mean, this happens, sadly, it happens almost every year, this time of year when football season starts up. Reason being, it's like some kids get it in their head that they need to drink like gallons of water in a day. And, they're out there sweating, practices are 3 hours. It's the end of August. It's, fucking hot and humid. and they've taken all this water, but they've excreted all these salts with their sweat, and that can go sideways real fast if you do that.
Oh yeah.
But typically this is it's not like it happens all the time. It's just every year it seems like there's at least one kid who dies because of this.
It's a very common occurrence.
Yeah, but they're generally drinking like multiple gallons of water. I mean, it's like absurd amounts.
Yeah. So
anyway.
you got taking the electrolytes with that. So that's how it works. I mean, not everything you take in is going to your muscles to make them contract harder or longer. You have vital functions. You have other organs that are indirectly contributing to your joints and connective tissues and muscles functioning correctly. And I hope we've kind of illustrated that point here. So taking in some intra-workout carbs won't do shit for your performance if you're already well hydrated, right? If you're already well fed and your blood sugar levels are pretty normal for that workout, right? I mean, shit, a type 1 diabetic will tell you all about that. They have to, take glucose tabs when they're exercising, and they have to check their sugar before they get in,
Yeah,
So
right.
the whole reason to take carbohydrates, specifically something like dextrose, during a workout is if you're at risk of low blood sugar or dehydration. It can be very helpful for those two purposes, because if you've trained with low blood sugar, it's not pleasant. You can't have your best performance if you're low blood sugar. You're going to get dizzy. If you have low blood pressure, you're going to get dizzy. If you're starting to get mild dehydration, you're going to get cramps. You're not going to be able to contract your muscles as well. You're going to get dizzy because you're probably going to get low blood pressure too. So all of these things, it's not necessarily your guns flexing, and extending. It's, other vital functions that can interfere with your ability to contract and relax your muscles and load your joints effectively, right? So it's just context dependent. If you're well fed, you go in there nice and full, your belt's up a notch, you're probably fine. You don't need to, pour dextrose into your protein shake or anything like that. But if you wake up in the morning and you're not a big eater, you're probably going to want to have some, water, carbohydrate, sodium, potassium chloride, right? So easiest way to do it is water, dextrose, and a salt tablet, or low salt tablet, so you get some potassium too. That's cheap. You can buy dextrose in large quantities. It's pretty cheap. Why dextrose over just table sugar? Somebody's probably asking that right now. Well, table sugar is sucrose. Sucrose is a disaccharide, so two saccharide sugar, so it has two sugars, and one of those sugars is fructose. Remember, fructose gets metabolized in the liver, so it doesn't really hit your bloodstream. It's not glucose. It's a complete different sugar, right? So it's only 50% glucose. Dextrose is 100% glucose. It's just another name for it. It has to do with the biochemistry nomenclature aspect of it. But that's why I prefer dextrose over just throwing sugar in there. High fructose corn syrup is 55% fructose and 45% glucose. But again, fructose,
it's not actually that high.
Yeah, fructose,
which is funny.
Fructose metabolizes slow, and your liver pretty much eats all of it, so it's not going to really hit your bloodstream and help you in that way. If you're trying to raise your blood glucose during a workout, dextrose is the superior sugar that you want to have in your intra-workout beverage, and typically mix that with probably a low salt tablet so that you get all of it, and then just drink plenty of water.
Yeah.
If you just woke up, you probably, a couple liters would probably be good, or at least a liter, liter and a half, something like that. The old recommendation is 1 milliliter per calorie. So, 2,000 calorie diet, 2 liters, 3,000 calorie diet, 3 liters per day, right? Probably want to have a third of that during a workout, maybe a quarter of that during a workout. During a weight workout, you're not sweating a lot, but if you're up in the morning, again, you've probably lost some fluid overnight, just sleeping. And you've burned up all your liver glycogen, so you need the sugar. So that's the big thing. That's where that becomes useful. If you haven't eaten all day and you got to go lift, you want to have a meal, obviously, carbs, protein, fat, but then you also want to make sure you're getting fluid and electrolytes and sugar so that you can go in the gym and hit the ground running.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, so there you go. Go drink some water. Yeah, so I think in a future episode, we need to talk about alcohol in a different context, in more of a diet context, I think. Because, we've kind of danced around it. We've mentioned alcohol many times when we were talking about your macros and dieting and compliance. But it is a huge deal, I find, with people who are struggling to lose weight. They're out drinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and that's, there's a whole bunch of problems that come along with that, both from the alcohol itself and from the behaviors that tends to follow when you drink alcohol. But we'll save that for another episode. For now, let's close out.
Yeah, that went longer than I thought it would. You think that hydration is such a simple concept, and it kind of is, but you can talk about it for a whole hour, which is pretty cool.
Well, you can, because you're about to finish a PhD in this stuff.
I guess so, yeah. Hopefully, don't jinx me. I don't like to talk about that because it's not done yet,
Okay, yeah, that's right. All right, yeah.
Anyways, let's close out. I think our next nutrition episode, we'll go ahead and talk about alcohol as a dedicated topic. It's the 4th macro. It's not really a macro, but it does contain calories per gram or ml. So it kind of acts as a macro in terms of contributing calories. So yeah, we'll go into that next time. So anyways, let's close out. So thank you for tuning in to the Weights and Plates podcast. You can find me at weightsandplates.com, www.weightsandplates.com. Trent made fun of me for that one day. Or on Instagram at _Robert_Santana, or you can find the gym at weights_and plates, or south of the airport here in Phoenix if you're local. We're 35th and Broadway, south of Sky Harbor Airport. Come check us out.
Yeah, it's a cool gym. I need to get down there sometime.
Hell yeah, you do, man. Hurry up and have that kid already.
All right, yeah, I'll have to fly down.
Yeah.
And then we'll do some halting deadlifts together.
Fuck yeah, off the deficit.
All right, well, yeah, you know where to find me, jonesbarbellclub.com. No www, you don't have to do that anymore, thanks to the wonders of the modern internet. Just jonesbarbellclub.com. You can also find me on Instagram at marmalade_cream. All right, we'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.